In a quiet little town surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, Sarah Reeves was known for her unique companions, two highly trained Belgian Malinois named Titan and Blaze. These weren't ordinary dogs. They were military canines who had served alongside soldiers in some of the most challenging missions. Though off-duty now, Sarah always kept them sharp with daily exercises to maintain their skills. On this particular afternoon, she decided to take a break from training and visit a small roadside diner nestled along the highway. The diner wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy spot where locals often stopped for coffee or burgers. As Sarah pulled into the parking lot, her presence immediately drew attention, not because of her, but because of her dogs. Titan and Blaze walked proudly beside her, their sleek coats gleaming in the sunlight and their focused eyes scanning their surroundings like true professionals. People passing by couldn't help but glance at the trio, curious about the bond between the handler and her loyal partners. Just as Sarah stepped out of her truck, the rumble of engines filled the air. A group of bikers roared into the parking lot, their motorcycles kicking up dust as they parked haphazardly near her vehicle. They were loud, unruly, and clearly enjoying the chaos they brought with them. The leader of the group, a burly man with tattoos covering his arms and a leather vest patched with symbols, stood out among them. His name was Gunnar, and he seemed to thrive on intimidating others. As soon as Gunnar noticed Sarah and her dogs, a smirk spread across his face. He nudged one of his friends and pointed at her, making a snide comment about how cute it was that a woman thought she could handle such big dogs. His laughter echoed through the parking lot, drawing the attention of other customers. Some of the bikers joined in, mocking Sarah's choice of companions and implying that her dogs were nothing more than glorified pets. One even joked that if those dogs tried to protect her, they'd probably run away instead. Sarah didn't react. She had faced tougher crowds before, in war zones, no less, and knew better than to let insults rattle her. Instead, she calmly walked toward the diner's entrance, keeping Titan and Blaze close by her side. But as she passed the group of bikers, Gunnar blocked her path. "Hey, lady," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You think those mutts are tough? Bet they can't do much besides wag their tails." Titan let out a low growl, sensing the tension in the air, but Sarah placed a reassuring hand on his head. Without saying a word, she brushed past Gunnar and entered the diner. Inside, she ordered her meal, all while feeling the weight of the bikers' stares boring into her back. It was clear they weren't done poking fun at her or testing her patience. Little did they know, Sarah had been trained to stay calm under pressure, and her dogs were far more capable than anyone in that room could imagine. But as she sat there eating her burger, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't over yet. Something told her the bikers wouldn't leave things as they were, and deep down, part of her wondered whether she might need to show them exactly what Titan and Blaze were made of. The atmosphere inside the diner grew heavier with each passing moment. The bikers, still lingering outside, continued their taunts, their voices carrying through the open windows. Gunnar, emboldened by his friend's laughter, stepped into the diner, letting the door slam shut behind him. His large frame cast a shadow over the room as he swaggered towards Sarah, who sat quietly at a corner table, finishing her meal. Titan and Blaze lay patiently at her feet, their sharp eyes tracking every movement in the room. "You know," Gunnar began, leaning against a nearby table with an air of arrogance, "I've seen plenty of people try to act tough with those so-called guard dogs. But honestly, most of them are all bark and no bite." He glanced down at Titan and Blaze, sneering. "What about yours? Think they're any different?" Sarah didn't look up from her plate. She took another bite of her burger, chewing slowly, deliberately ignoring him. Her calm demeanor only seemed to irritate Gunnar further. One of the other bikers chimed in, chuckling. Maybe she's scared to admit her dogs aren't as tough as she thinks they are. At that, Sarah finally raised her head. Her gaze met Gunnar's, steady and unflinching. There was no anger in her expression, just quiet confidence. "These aren't just dogs," she said evenly. They're highly trained professionals, more disciplined than most people I've met. Her voice carried a weight that silenced the room for a brief moment. Gunnar scoffed, clearly unimpressed. Oh yeah, prove it then. Let's see what your professionals can do. His tone dripped with mockery, but Sarah didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she studied him for a moment, weighing whether engaging would be worth it. She had learned long ago that proving herself to doubters wasn't always necessary. Still, something about this situation felt different. These men weren't just mocking her, they were dismissing the years of hard work, dedication, and trust she'd built with her dogs. Before she could respond, one of the bikers leaned forward, grinning. Come on, lady. Don't tell us you're too scared to show off your little show ponies. This time, even the diner staff exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of where this confrontation might lead. Sarah sighed softly, setting her napkin on the table. She turned to Titan and Blaze, speaking softly in a language only they understood. Both dogs perked up instantly, their ears twitching as they awaited her command. Then, looking back at Gunnar, she spoke firmly. If you want proof, fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. Her words caught the bikers off guard. For a split second, there was doubt in Gunnar's eyes, though he quickly masked it with bravado. Warn me, he repeated, laughing nervously. What are they gonna do? Lick me to death? Ignoring his jibe, Sarah stood up, motioning for the group to follow her outside. The bikers hesitated for a moment before shrugging and trailing after her, eager to see how this would play out. Customers in the diner craned their necks to watch as the unlikely showdown moved outdoors. By now, a small crowd had gathered in the parking lot, curious locals drawn by the commotion. As Sarah walked ahead with Titan and Blaze trotting confidently beside her, whispers rippled through the onlookers. Some admired her composure, while others doubted her ability to stand up to such a rowdy bunch. Gunnar, meanwhile, strutted behind her, already gloating about how easily he'd win whatever challenge lay ahead. Once outside, Sarah stopped near an open stretch of asphalt. Turning to face the bikers, she crossed her arms, her posture relaxed yet commanding. All right, she said, addressing Gunnar directly. You wanted to test my dogs. Here's the deal. If they can subdue one of you without causing serious harm, you'll admit defeat and leave us alone. If not, she paused, raising an eyebrow. Then I'll apologize for wasting your time. The bikers erupted into laughter, slapping each other on the back. To them, this was already a foregone conclusion. How could two dogs possibly take down a grown man? Gunnar grinned, nodding agreeably. Fine by me, he said, gesturing for one of his buddies to step forward. Crusher here will volunteer. Right, Crusher. Crusher, a hulking figure with muscles bulging under his leather jacket, cracked his knuckles and stepped forward, smirking. He flexed his arms dramatically, clearly relishing the attention. Let's see what these pups got, he said, sneering down at Titan and Blaze. Sarah knelt beside her dogs, whispering commands in low tones. Both Titan and Blaze shifted slightly, their bodies tense and ready. Though outwardly calm, Sarah knew the stakes. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about showing respect for her dogs and the incredible bond they shared. As she rose to her feet, she locked eyes with Gunnar one last time. The tension in the parking lot was palpable as Sarah stood tall, her presence commanding despite the chaos around her. Titan and Blaze sat at her side, their bodies coiled like springs, ready to spring into action at her slightest command. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, drawn by the promise of an unusual spectacle. Whispers rippled through the air, some skeptical, others curious, and a few quietly rooting for Sarah and her dogs. Gunnar, ever the showman, stepped forward with a smirk, gesturing dramatically toward Crusher, who cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders. All right, lady, Gunnar said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Let's see what your little circus act can do. He turned to Crusher and gave him a playful slap on the back. Don't go easy on them, buddy. Crusher chuckled, flexing his massive arms as if to intimidate the dogs. His towering frame loomed over Titan and Blaze, but neither dog flinched. Instead, they remained perfectly still, their eyes locked onto him with an intensity that made even the most confident onlookers uneasy. It was clear these weren't ordinary pets. They were professionals, trained to assess threats and respond with precision. Sarah knelt beside her dogs once more, speaking softly in tones only they could understand. Her hands moved gently over their sleek coats, calming them while reinforcing her trust. She glanced up briefly at Crusher, studying his stance and movements. Then, rising to her feet, she addressed the bikers directly. "Here's how this will work," she began, her voice firm and steady. "My dogs are highly trained, and they'll follow my commands exactly. If you resist aggressively, they'll respond accordingly. No harm will come to anyone unless you force it. Do you understand?" Gunnar waved her off dismissively. Yeah, we get it. Just get on with it already." Sarah nodded, unfazed by his impatience. She took a step back, giving herself space to observe. With a deep breath, she raised her hand slightly, signaling Titan to move forward. The Malinois rose smoothly to his feet, his muscles rippling beneath his coat. Every movement he made was deliberate, calculated, a stark contrast to the reckless energy radiating from the bikers. Titan circled Crusher slowly, his gaze unwavering. The biker sneered, clearly unimpressed. "What's this? Some kinda dance routine?" He jeered, spreading his arms wide, as if daring the dog to make a move. But Titan didn't take the bait. Instead, he continued his methodical approach, staying just out of reach, while keeping Crusher firmly in his sights. The crowd watched intently, the murmurs dying down as everyone realized something remarkable was unfolding. Even Gunnar's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. This wasn't going according to plan. Crusher, growing increasingly frustrated by the dog's evasive tactics, decided to take matters into his own hands. With a grunt, he lunged forward, aiming to grab Titan by the scruff of his neck. But Titan was faster. In one fluid motion, the dog darted to the side, avoiding Crusher's grasp entirely. Before the biker could recover, Titan pivoted sharply, driving his shoulder into Crusher's leg. The sudden impact threw Crusher off balance, causing him to stumble. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as Titan pressed his advantage, circling around to pin Crusher's arm behind his back with surprising strength. Crusher yelped in surprise, struggling instinctively against the hold. But Titan held firm, applying just enough pressure to keep him immobilized without causing serious injury. Sarah raised her hand again, giving a sharp whistle. Instantly, Titan released his grip and retreated to her side, sitting obediently as though nothing had happened. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the murmurs began anew, this time filled with awe rather than skepticism. Crusher straightened up, rubbing his arm sheepishly, his earlier bravado replaced by embarrassment. Gunnar stared at Sarah, his expression unreadable, though the cockiness had noticeably faded. Sarah crossed her arms, meeting Gunnar's gaze evenly. "That was just one dog," she said simply. "Do you still want to continue?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with implication. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they might have underestimated not only Sarah, but also the incredible bond she shared with her dogs. For the first time since the confrontation began, doubt crept into their ranks, and Sarah knew the tide was turning in her favor. The silence that followed Sarah's question was deafening. Gunnar shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado wavering under the weight of what had just transpired. The crowd of onlookers murmured among themselves, their skepticism replaced by a mix of admiration and disbelief. Crusher stood rubbing his arm, looking both embarrassed and slightly shaken, while the other bikers exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear they hadn't expected Titan to be so effective, or so disciplined. But Gunnar wasn't ready to back down yet. He glanced at his friends, then back at Sarah, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All right, fine," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "One dog got lucky. Let's see if your other one can pull off the same trick." His tone carried a hint of defiance, but there was an undercurrent of doubt now. Something Sarah noticed immediately. Sarah didn't respond right away. Instead, she knelt beside Blaze, her second Malinois, who had been sitting patiently throughout the demonstration. She spoke softly to him, her voice calm and reassuring, as she ran her hand over his coat. Blaze's ears perked up, and his tail wagged briefly before he returned to his focused stance. Unlike Titan, Blaze exuded a quieter intensity, his sharp eyes never leaving Crusher. "Same rules apply," Sarah said finally, standing up and addressing the group. Her tone was firm but fair, leaving no room for argument. "If you resist aggressively, my dog will respond accordingly. Do you understand?" Crusher nodded reluctantly, though his confidence was visibly shaken. Gunnar gave him another pat on the back, though it lacked the earlier swagger. "You've got this, buddy," he muttered, though his words sounded more like encouragement for himself than for Crusher. This time, Blaze took the lead. He stepped forward slowly, his movements deliberate and measured, almost predatory in their precision. Crusher tensed, watching the dog warily. Without warning, Blaze darted toward him, moving with such speed that Crusher barely had time to react. Instinctively, he raised his arms to defend himself, but Blaze was already circling behind him, staying low to the ground. Crusher spun around, trying to keep the dog in sight, but Blaze's agility made it nearly impossible. Every time Crusher lunged or swung, Blaze sidestepped effortlessly, staying just out of reach. Frustration bubbled to the surface as Crusher realized he couldn't land a single blow or even get close enough to touch the dog. Then, in one swift motion, Blaze leaped. His powerful legs propelled him forward, and within seconds he had pinned Crusher's leg between his jaws, not hard enough to break skin, but with enough force to immobilize him completely. Crusher let out a startled yelp, freezing in place as Blaze held him firmly. The crowd gasped, some covering their mouths in shock, others clapping instinctively at the display of skill. Sarah whistled sharply, and Blaze released his grip instantly, retreating to her side. Like Titan, he sat calmly, his chest rising and falling evenly, as if the entire encounter had been nothing more than a routine exercise. Crusher stumbled backward, clutching his leg, his face flushed with embarrassment. He muttered something under his breath, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the crowd. Gunnar opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. For the first time, he looked genuinely unsure of himself. The cocky attitude that had defined him moments ago was gone, replaced by a quiet unease. Even the other bikers seemed reluctant to speak, their earlier mockery silenced by the undeniable reality in front of them. Sarah crossed her arms again, her expression unreadable. "Still want to test them further?" she asked, her voice steady and calm. There was no gloating in her tone, no sense of triumph, just a quiet authority that demanded respect. The bikers hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks. They had come here looking for entertainment, expecting an easy win against a woman and her pets. But what they had witnessed instead was a masterclass in discipline, teamwork, and sheer professionalism. Gunnar finally broke the silence, clearing his throat awkwardly. All right," he said, holding up his hands. "Your dogs are impressive. We'll give you that." Sarah nodded, accepting his acknowledgement without comment. She turned her attention back to Titan and Blaze, praising them quietly for their flawless performance. Both dogs wagged their tails proudly, basking in her approval. The crowd began to disperse, many shaking their heads in amazement as they returned to their cars or went back inside the diner. For Sarah, the confrontation wasn't about proving herself. It was about showing these men that assumptions based on appearances could be dangerously wrong. And for the bikers, it was a humbling reminder that true strength lies not in size or arrogance, but in. The air in the parking lot had shifted dramatically. What had started as a taunting spectacle was now tinged with an awkward mix of respect and unease. Gunnar, who moments ago had been brimming with arrogance, now stood quietly, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. The smirk that once dominated his face was replaced by a furrowed brow, as if he were trying to process what he'd just witnessed. His friends, too, seemed unsure of how to proceed, their earlier bravado melting away like ice under the sun. But Gunnar wasn't ready to concede completely, at least not yet. He glanced at Sarah, then at her dogs, Titan and Blaze, who sat calmly by her side, exuding quiet confidence. For all his bluster, Gunnar couldn't ignore the fact that these animals weren't ordinary pets. They were highly skilled professionals capable of handling situations far more intense than this impromptu showdown. Still, pride wouldn't let him walk away without one last attempt to save face. "All right," Gunnar said finally, his voice firmer than before, but lacking its earlier mockery. "Your dogs did good, real good. But here's the thing. You've only shown us what one dog can do at a time. What happens when both of them come after someone together? You think your little show will still work?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, studying him carefully. She could see the challenge in his eyes, but there was something else too, a flicker of genuine curiosity beneath the bravado. It was clear he wanted to test her limits, but part of him also wanted to understand the full extent of her dog's abilities. Sarah weighed her options silently. She knew better than to escalate things unnecessarily, but she also recognized that walking away now might leave room for doubt in the bikers' minds, and that wasn't something she was willing to risk. "Fine," Sarah replied evenly, her tone calm but resolute. "If you're serious about seeing what they can do, I'll show you. But let me make one thing crystal clear. My dogs are trained to subdue threats quickly and efficiently. They won't hold back if provoked, and they're strong enough to injure, or worse, if they feel it's necessary. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Her words hung heavy in the air, carrying a weight that silenced even the murmuring crowd. Gunnar hesitated, glancing at his friends for support. Some of them looked uneasy, while others nodded encouragingly. Finally, he squared his shoulders, feigning confidence despite the knot forming in his stomach. "Yeah, we're sure," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "Let's see what your dogs can really do." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she knelt beside Titan and Blaze, speaking softly to them in low tones. Her hands moved gently over their coats, reinforcing the bond of trust they shared. Both dogs listened intently, their ears twitching as they absorbed her instructions. When she rose to her feet, her expression was unreadable, but her posture spoke volumes. She was ready. Gunnar stepped forward, cracking his knuckles theatrically. "All right, lady," he said, attempting to sound tough. "I'm calling your bluff. Let's see if your dogs can take on me." His friends cheered him on half-heartedly, though their enthusiasm felt forced now. Even Crusher, who had regained his composure somewhat, shot Gunnar a wary look, as if questioning whether this was such a wise move. Sarah gave a sharp whistle, signaling Titan and Blaze to prepare. Both dogs sprang into action instantly, moving with synchronized precision that left no doubt about their training. Titan positioned himself slightly ahead of Blaze, creating a strategic formation designed to confuse and overwhelm any opponent. Their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, drawing every eye in the parking lot. For a brief moment, Gunnar faltered, his confidence wavering as he realized the gravity of the situation. These weren't playful pups looking for attention. They were disciplined warriors poised to act on command. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to stand his ground. "All right, mutts," he muttered under his breath, clenching his fists. "Let's see what you've got." Sarah took a step back, giving her dogs space to maneuver. Then, with a single word, sharp and clear, she signaled them to advance. In an instant, Titan and Blaze sprang forward, their coordinated attack leaving Gunnar scrambling to react. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide with amazement as the scene unfolded before them. It was no longer a test of strength. It was a demonstration of skill, teamwork, and unwavering loyalty. And for Gunnar, it was about to become a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. As soon as Sarah gave the command, Titan and Blaze sprang into action with a speed that left everyone breathless. Gunnar barely had time to react before the dogs were on him, their movements perfectly synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. Titan darted toward Gunnar's legs, circling low and fast, while Blaze flanked him from behind, cutting off any chance of escape. The bikers and onlookers watched in stunned silence, their earlier jeers replaced by wide-eyed awe. Gunnar tried to stand his ground, raising his arms defensively as if he could fend them off. But the dogs were too quick, too smart. Titan lunged first, grabbing hold of Gunnar's ankle, not hard enough to break skin, but firmly enough to throw him off balance. Gunnar stumbled, letting out a surprised grunt as he struggled to regain his footing. Before he could recover, Blaze leaped forward, using his powerful hind legs to pin Gunnar's arm behind his back. The biker leader let out a sharp yelp, realizing for the first time that resisting would only make things worse. The crowd gasped collectively, some covering their mouths in shock, while others whispered in admiration. Even Crusher, who had been standing nearby, took an involuntary step backward, his earlier bravado completely gone. Gunnar thrashed instinctively, trying to free himself, but the dog's grip was unyielding. Every movement he made seemed to tighten their control, proving just how skilled they were at adapting to resistance. Sarah stood calmly a few feet away, her arms crossed as she observed the scene unfold. Her expression remained composed, betraying none of the satisfaction she must have felt. She knew this wasn't about humiliating Gunnar. It was about showing him and his friends the true capabilities of her dogs. Still, there was no denying the impact of what they were witnessing. These weren't ordinary animals. They were highly trained professionals capable of subduing even the strongest opponents. Finally, Gunnar stopped struggling, panting heavily as he realized further resistance was futile. "Okay, okay," he shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "I give up. Call them off." At Sarah's whistle, both Titan and Blaze released their holds instantly, retreating to her side with the same calm obedience they'd shown throughout the entire encounter. They sat beside her, tails wagging slightly, as though nothing extraordinary had just happened. Meanwhile, Gunnar scrambled to his feet, brushing himself off awkwardly. His face was flushed with embarrassment, and sweat glistened on his forehead, despite the cool breeze. For the first time since the confrontation began, he looked genuinely humbled. The other bikers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to say or do next. Their earlier mockery had dissolved into awkward silence, replaced by a newfound respect for Sarah and her dogs. One of them muttered something under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. Another whistled softly, clearly impressed by the display of skill and discipline. Sarah turned to Gunnar, her gaze steady but not unkind. "Still think my dogs are just pets?" she asked, her tone measured but pointed. Gunnar hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. "No," he admitted reluctantly, avoiding eye contact. "They're incredible. I've never seen anything like it." His words hung in the air, breaking the tension that had built up over the past hour. The crowd began to disperse slowly, many nodding approvingly at Sarah as they returned to their cars or went back inside the diner. Some even approached her to offer quiet compliments, thanking her for putting on such an impressive demonstration. For Sarah, the moment wasn't about gloating or proving herself superior. It was about earning respect through action. As she knelt beside Titan and Blaze, praising them softly for their flawless performance, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the bond they shared. These dogs weren't just tools or weapons. They were partners who trusted her implicitly, just as she trusted them. And for Gunnar and his crew, the lesson was clear: never underestimate someone, or something, based on appearances alone. What had started as a taunt had ended as a humbling reminder of the power of skill, teamwork, and mutual respect. Though pride still lingered in the air, it was now tempered by a newfound appreciation for Sarah, for her dogs, and for the unexpected lessons life sometimes delivers when we least expect it. The confrontation in the parking lot had reached its climax, and the aftermath was palpable. Gunnar stood awkwardly, brushing dirt off his leather vest while avoiding eye contact with Sarah and her dogs. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet humility that no one could have predicted at the start of the day. The other bikers shuffled their feet nervously, glancing at each other as if unsure how to process what they'd just witnessed. The once boisterous group now seemed subdued, their earlier arrogance completely deflated. Gunnar finally cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy silence. "Look," he began, his voice softer than before. "I owe you an apology. And your dogs too." He gestured vaguely toward Titan and Blaze, who sat calmly beside Sarah, their tails wagging gently as if sensing the shift in mood. "We didn't mean any disrespect. Well, maybe we did, but we didn't know what we were messing with." Sarah nodded slowly, accepting his words without gloating or pressing further. She understood that admitting fault wasn't easy for someone like Gunnar, someone who clearly valued strength and pride above all else. "Apology accepted," she said simply, her tone calm but firm. "But remember this, it's not about size, or toughness, or even being intimidating. It's about skill, discipline, and respect, for yourself and others." Her words struck a chord with the bikers. Gunnar nodded thoughtfully, his expression more serious than anyone had seen it so far. "You're right," he admitted reluctantly. "We judged you wrong. Thought you were just some woman out here playing with fancy pets. Turns out, we were the ones looking foolish." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Even Crusher, who had been pinned earlier by Blaze, stepped forward hesitantly. "Yeah," he added, scratching the back of his head. "Your dogs are something else. Never seen anything like them." There was genuine admiration in his voice now, free of the mocking edge from earlier. Encouraged by his friend's reactions, Gunnar took another step closer to Sarah. "Listen," he said, extending a hand tentatively. "How about we make this right? Let us buy you lunch, or dinner, if you prefer, on us." He glanced at his crew for support, and they nodded enthusiastically, eager to smooth things over. Sarah considered his offer for a moment, then shook her head politely. "Thanks, but I'm good," she replied with a small smile. "I've got responsibilities waiting for me back home. Besides, my dogs aren't big fans of sitting still for long." Gunnar chuckled nervously, scratching his beard. "Fair enough. Still, can't blame a guy for trying." He paused, studying Sarah and her dogs one last time. "You ever need anything at all, you let us know, all right? Consider this our way of saying thanks. And sorry." It was a surprising gesture, coming from someone who had started the day mocking her. Sarah appreciated the sincerity behind it, nodding graciously. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, though both she and Gunnar knew it was unlikely she'd ever take him up on the offer. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and prepared to leave, Gunnar lingered a moment longer. "Hey," he called out, turning back briefly, "you think there's any chance you'd teach people like us how to handle dogs like yours someday? Or is that classified?" Sarah chuckled softly, shaking her head. "It takes years of training, for both the handler and the dog. Not exactly something you pick up overnight." "Still," Gunnar persisted, grinning sheepishly, "if you change your mind, you know where to find us." With that, the bikers revved their engines and roared out of the parking lot, leaving behind only the faint scent of exhaust fumes and the memory of an unforgettable encounter. As the sound of their motorcycles faded into the distance, Sarah turned to Titan and Blaze, kneeling down to praise them one final time. "Good job, boys," she murmured, her voice filled with pride. Both dogs leaned into her touch, their loyalty unwavering. For Sarah, the day had ended exactly as it needed to, not with anger or resentment, but with mutual understanding and respect. For the bikers, it was a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Never underestimate someone based on appearances, and always respect the bond between a handler and her dogs. As she climbed into her truck and drove away, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for her companions, for the crowd's unexpected support, and for the reminder that sometimes life gives us the perfect opportunity to prove ourselves when it matters most. As Sarah drove away from the diner, the late afternoon sun casting golden hues over the rolling hills, she couldn't help but reflect on the events of the day. What had started as a simple outing with Titan and Blaze had turned into something far more meaningful, an unexpected lesson in humility for both her and the bikers. The confrontation hadn't been planned, nor had it been desired, but it had unfolded in a way that left everyone changed, even if only slightly. Titan and Blaze rested quietly in the back seat, their heads resting on their paws as they gazed out the window at the passing scenery. To them, the encounter was just another demonstration of their training. A job well done, nothing more. But Sarah knew better. These moments weren't just about showing off skills. They were about trust, partnership, and proving to the world that their bond was unbreakable. She reached back briefly, patting each dog affectionately, grateful for their loyalty and discipline. Her thoughts drifted to the bikers, particularly Gunner. She could still see the look on his face when he finally admitted defeat, the mix of embarrassment, respect, and maybe even a hint of admiration. It wasn't every day that someone like him swallowed his pride and apologized so openly. In a way, Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for him. Being wrong isn't easy, especially for someone who prides himself on strength and dominance. Yet, despite his earlier arrogance, he had shown enough decency to acknowledge his mistake, and that Sarah realized was worth respecting. The road stretched ahead, winding through forests and open fields, and Sarah allowed herself a small smile. This wasn't the first time she'd faced doubters or skeptics, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to people underestimating her because of her gender, or dismissing her dogs as mere companions rather than highly trained professionals. But experiences like today reminded her why those assumptions didn't matter. Actions spoke louder than words, and Titan and Blaze had proven themselves once again, not just to the bikers, but to everyone watching. Back home, Sarah parked her truck near the barn where she kept her equipment and gear. As she opened the door, Titan and Blaze bounded out energetically, ready for their next adventure. They loved being outdoors, exploring trails, and playing fetch, and Sarah made sure they always had time to unwind after intense situations like the one earlier. Today was no exception. She grabbed their favorite toys from the storage bin, a bright orange ball for Blaze and a sturdy tug-of-war rope for Titan, and headed toward the open field behind the house. The dogs sprinted ahead, their tails wagging furiously as they anticipated the fun to come. For the next hour, Sarah threw balls, played tug-of-war, and laughed as the two dogs chased each other in circles. It was a reminder of how much joy they brought into her life, not just as working partners, but as cherished friends. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah sat on the porch steps, watching Titan and Blaze settle down beside her. Their playful energy had faded, replaced by the calm contentment that came after a long day. She leaned back, letting the cool evening breeze wash over her, and thought about the lessons of the day. For the bikers, it had been a humbling experience, one that might stick with them for years to come. For Sarah, it reinforced the importance of staying true to herself and trusting in her abilities, no matter what others said or thought. And for Titan and Blaze, it was simply another day of doing what they did best, protecting, impressing, and standing by her side without question. As darkness fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for her dogs, for the challenges that strengthened her resolve, and for the quiet beauty of moments like these. Life had a funny way of throwing curveballs, but sometimes those curveballs led to lessons that stayed with you forever. And as she looked at Titan and Blaze, sleeping peacefully beside her, she knew one thing for certain: they would always face whatever came their way, together.